Hi, everyone. I'm Stacy Heisman with GI Jobs, and here today I have a fabulous guest I'm going to talk to about her transition into the civilian world. Her name is Jann Weiss, and she is located out in Arizona. Hi, Jann. How are you?
Good morning.
Good
I'm
morning.
great. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, listen, tell me a little bit about your background. Tell me how long you served in the military, what your MOS was, and what you do right now.
All right. So I spent 20 years in the Navy. I started out as an enlisted person. I was an air traffic controller for about 6 years. And then I was in a very specialized program where they took enlisted people and turned them into naval aviators, made them officers. So I did that for the rest of my career, primarily as an instructor pilot, and then ending up flying unmanned aerial targets. So UAVs, basically. Go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you. So, how many years did you spend enlisted before you went into the?
So 6 years and 6 years enlisted, and then 14 years as an officer.
Got it. Okay.
I retired and ended up moving into Arizona. Started out as a UAV instructor for the Army. That contract did not last very long, so I was unemployed for a short period of time, and then I found myself somewhere just moving into the Army intelligence software industry, which is what I do now. I'm a configuration management analyst, and that means basically I track the parts and pieces of a software baseline that goes out to make sure that the end user gets everything they need and all the correct stuff, not just a mismatch of, say, documentation and software. And we also make sure that anything that changes within one version or another is tracked and approved.
Well, you make it sound so easy, Jann.
It's a lot of tracking and paperwork.
A lot of tracking and paperwork.
Yes.
Right. So you work right now for ManTech International, right?
Correct.
Okay. How long have you been with them?
I started with them in 2019 because of a contract change. I had worked with other companies doing the same job before.
You did. Okay. So, and tell me a little bit about your transition. You spent 20 years in the service. So tell me what it was like to get out after 20 years.
So when I got out at 20 years, obviously, like I'm sure many people, I was very concerned about, could I find a job? Where was that job going to be? Being a naval aviator, I thought that I was very, very limited in my possibilities. Okay. I didn't have the right qualifications to go to work for the airlines. I wasn't going to go be an American pilot because I didn't have the big airlines. I'd been flying little aircraft, teaching other aviators how to fly. And I'd been flying these aerial targets. So I knew I could work into the remote aviation world, but again, minor, that's a very niche market. So I was just fortuitous. That's a good word. Right before I retired, an article came across my desk in my office while I was still in the Navy that said, oh, by the way, we've just trained these new young Army soldiers to fly these aerial targets. And I contacted that company and got a job here in Arizona. That job lasted 18 months.
Months. Okay. So where did you go after that job? Well, it sounds like you had, a lot of people I talk to when they transition from the service, it doesn't matter whether it was yesterday or 20 years ago, that first job they get isn't always a job they stay with for a long time. It's always that first stepping stone. Did you find that was a great way to transition and then move on to something else?
Well, it wasn't by choice. I had literally been employed for less than a week when the company lost the contract. Oh. Actually, the government, right? Yeah, I mean, the government canceled the contract. So they managed to keep me employed for 18 months, and then the work just disappeared. It had nothing to do with me or that, but the work disappeared. So I was unemployed, and now I'm in a very small town in Arizona with limited possibilities, in my opinion. I mean, again, I was an aviator. I didn't know anything else. So a friend I had met said, "Hey, there's a job fair on post. Why don't you come bring a resume?" I went to see her company and dropped a resume off. And while I was there, I dropped a resume off at several other companies. And one of them just happened to hire me and call me up anyway, and then hire me. And I've stayed with the same government customer ever since. So it's going on 24 years with the same government customer. Contractors have changed.
Sure. But I have to tell you, I think your story is really so relatable because it proves that when you get out, I love the fact that you said that you weren't sure what you were qualified for when you got out because you were in this niche market. And I think sometimes a lot of our listeners out there feel like their time in the military is very niche related. Now that you've been you've been out for 20 some odd years. Tell me, do you feel like your service limited you in your job aspirations in the civilian world?
More in my head than my actual qualifications.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
It was hard for me to equate what I had done on a day-to-day basis to something in the corporate world.
Okay.
Looking back, it's easy to see that all those things that the military teaches you about attention to detail and following processes and doing things to standards, that applies. And it really applies in the job I do now. I am famous for creating checklists because as an aviator, I live and die by checklists.
That's right.
So we have checklist about how we do every task, about did we get all the tasks done that need to be done before we send the software out. So those sort of things related very well. Obviously, you learn management skills, you learn people skills, how to deal with tense situations. But it's hard to put that out because you don't know the right terms, right? I would say in the military, I would say I used a checklist. Now I would say I created an audit.
Okay, interesting. I love that. I love the way you flipped the script on that one. I think that's really important for people to know. Yeah. Okay, now looking at that, you told me you already segued into my next question, which is how did you find this job? And it was through a job fair. Would you encourage others to do job fairs, or what other tools have you learned since you've been out that people find their next job or transfer into the civilian world from military service?
Yeah, I mean, like many things, a lot of it's not what you know, but who you know. So obviously networking is very important. In today's world, we network on social media. Mm-hmm. I would encourage people to use those sites that are very, very specific for jobs, like LinkedIn, Indeed. I consistently get flooded with other not offers, but at least opportunities to look at other work, right? And don't just look at the jobs that you think have and that part of the trick, I think, in looking for a job was learning the buzzwords of the new world. Right. If I knew what the buzzword is, and especially today, because nobody has a standard resume, they want you to have a resume that matches what their qualifications are. So you look at a list of qualifications and you have to figure out what words in here can I equate to something that's currently in my resume and tweak my resume just a little bit to match those qualifications. So you have to be a little, I don't know, inspired or inventive to try to figure out how to broaden your scope, especially I think with a first job.
Okay, and I think that's fantastic. And just before we run out of time too much, two more questions. One is, tell me about ManTech International. Do you feel like they are military friendly? Do you feel like that this is a place that veterans should look to?
ManTech is a huge government contractor, one of the largest. So they have a very large job market in a variety of situations, and absolutely they are veteran friendly. I would say that I happen to work on a very small contract, but I can only think of maybe 2 or 3 people who are not former military. Many of them retired, but not all of them.
Yeah,
but sure. Definitely been veteran friendly.
I love it. And that's what we're talking about today, is trying to ease this transition for those who are looking to the civilian world for their next job. Okay, Jann, you gave some really good advice about how to find the next job regarding using the social media terms of today and the buzzwords. What other kind of, nugget of advice would you give maybe to those transitioning right now? Maybe talk about, did you have some fear? Did you have some insecurities getting out, moving into the civilian world?
Absolutely. I mean, first off, it took 10 weeks from the time I did my job interview for the job offer to come to fruition. Okay. And at that point, I was beginning to think, maybe I'll go work at the car wash or the McDonald's. Well, I'm a kind of type A personality, and not working was not a good idea for me. I cleaned every room in the house and every closet and cupboard, but I could only do that for so long. So there's obviously apprehension on that first job. Am I going to find something? And I think, you begin to look, when the perfect job doesn't come your way, you begin to look for that job that maybe gets you going. An interim job that moves you to the next job. You learn a skill set, you meet some people. So unless the perfect job just jumps in your lap as soon as you get out of the military, that's great. But I would say for most people, it doesn't. So you take a job and maybe you love it and maybe you don't, but you learn from that. Even every little job change I've done within within contracting, there's a couple of times I've moved positions that I really hated it. I thought, I do not want to do this job. This just sucks. I don't like the people I'm working. I don't like the tasks I have. Funny enough, 6 months down the road or 2 years down the road, something I learned in that position has served me very, very well. So even the worst job often brings about something that you can use later on, a skill set, maybe just an acquaintance that will lead you to something new. So you have to keep a very, very open mind, I think, especially when you don't have a job and you're looking for something new.
I have to tell you, Jann, this is one of my favorite interviews. And I don't know if it's because, I don't know, you have such wise advice. And I think I don't know, I just love your background. And I think you speak very clear language to those out there listening who have some fear of getting out and how the process works. So I definitely appreciate this interview today. And I think people will learn a lot from you. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been fun this morning.
Thank you very much. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us today at GI Jobs. And Jann Weiss was with us from ManTech International. And it was literally my pleasure. Thank you, Jann.
Thank you very much.
All right. Bye-bye.